Hello and welcome to the Talking Locks with Locitude podcast. This is another episode of Chair Convos, and today, my name is still Balogun, by the way, but today I have the pleasure of being joined by Zandria Robinson. She is an American writer and scholar. Her work focuses on popular music, ethnography, and race and culture in the American South. She is the author of 2 books, This Ain't Chicago, Race, Class, and Regional Identity in the Post-Soul South, 2014, and Chocolate Cities, The Black Map of American Life, 2018. Robinson is an associate professor of African American Studies at Georgetown University. Well, I got all of that from Wikipedia. That's not usually how we start out at the salon, but I felt that I could do it justice by, asking Google. Zandria.
I forget that I exist on Google sometimes.
You do.
So that is funny, yes.
I promise I do not Google you before you come to the salon.
Yes, I forget I exist there. That feels like, I'm like, oh, who is she talking about? She's so accomplished. It's me.
Yeah, it's you. It's all you. But thank you very much for having this conversation
I'm so
today.
glad to be here. I am so covetous of this podcast. I felt left out that I hadn't been on. So when's she going to ask me to be on the podcast?
If I had known, I would have asked sooner than later. But with this new series, we're basically talking about the same things we would have talked about if we were at the salon. So imagine you were on the chair and I was actually making your hair. I think over the years, and I said in the first episode with Abiese that I have met so many people and we've had fantastic conversations. We've learned from each other and just stayed. It's a network for itself, and I'm hoping that bringing this conversation to the world is useful to somebody out there. So we're not talking about anything specifically, but we're talking about everything, and everything kind of matters. Okay, so one of the first things I would like to explore is your background, because you're a young professor. How did you become a professor in your very, very early 40s? How long have you been a professor?
So technically I have been an instructor of record for my own class since 2004. So I was a master's student at the University of Memphis, and I'm going to repeat that. I was a master's student at the University of Memphis, and when you're in graduate school, you can teach your own class. So that was my first time teaching my own class, fall of 2004. And so I have been pretty much doing that ever since.
That's actually quite confusing. You can teach your own class?
Because it's training for you as you're going to go, because you're going to go on and be a professor. So yeah, when I was in my second year of graduate school, of my master's, I taught my own class. It was at 8 a.m. It was an intro to sociology class. I think it met Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And yeah, it was just kind of like they just throw you in there into the teaching. I can definitely say I'm a better teacher now than I was then, but that's when I started. And I have taught at all kinds of institutions. I've taught at large public institutions. I've taught at community colleges. I taught at a nursing college one time because they had to have a health and society course. I've taught at for-profit universities. I've taught at private liberal arts colleges, and I've taught at big, large research elite colleges.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. I actually think I knew you very well. I'm just realizing I know you more. I'm still stuck on being able to teach your own class. So do you get like the curriculum beforehand?
You make the curriculum up yourself.
But I don't really understand it. So the people you're teaching, are they using that knowledge for anything?
Yeah.
Do you have to grade their papers? They have to pass your class?
Yeah. Just like you're the instructor of record, you're the professor because you're a professor in training.
But you don't necessarily take the class because you're teaching it.
Yeah, no, you don't take it. This is undergraduates. So you're teaching the undergraduates and when you're a graduate student.
Oh, okay. All right. I see. Oh, that's interesting. Well, you've been on the path for a very long time. And I remember you telling me you kind of graduated quite young and you've been on this track for a very long time.
Somebody in my family, I was at a family event, and somebody mentioned that there was something past the BA. And they said, well, then after that, you can get the master's. And then I said, well, what comes next? And they said, the PhD. And I said, what's the highest? And they said, PhD. I said, I'm getting that. And I think I was like 8 years old. And, we were academically, my sister and I, we were very strong students. My mother was very, very, very about the academics. And we were, very accomplished. And we were in what they call here gifted classes. And yeah, we were into studying and into our studies. But just for me to say that, when I think of that, it's like, who said that? That's how you know your higher self is talking. Like, who said that? And so, yeah, I did actually do that. I got my undergraduate degree and I finished that in 3 years. And then I was like, oh, what should I do now? So I just got the master's because I had extra scholarship money left over from undergrad. I was like, I'll get the master's.
Was that because you completed it in 3 years? Short time?
Yeah. Okay. And then after that, I said, well, I knew I was getting the PhD, but I thought I was going to get it in literature. And I had taken a detour and gone into sociology because I was always into literature. That was my thing. And then I took this detour into sociology thinking I was going to go back to literature. But then I realized that if I went back to literature, I wouldn't get any credit for all this master's graduate work I had just done. So I was like, no, I'm going to stick with sociology so I can get some credit towards my PhD. And I did. I got a year off of my coursework.
Okay.
For Northwestern, yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. That sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
But something just struck me. I studied architecture. And the thing that made me study architecture was my secondary school teacher in GS3. I'm not sure what the equivalent of that class is in America. But he had, I don't know if I've said the story anywhere else before. But the previous week, he had taught us how to inscribe a circle in a polygon. And it was an intro to technology class. So you kind of played with the T-square, the drawing board and all of that stuff. And if I remember correctly, most of the people in the class were boys. This is so long ago, I don't remember. But that week, he kind of said, okay, let's do a little bit of revision from what we did last week. And he called like 3 boys to come do the same thing we did last week, which was inscribe a circle in a polygon. And they all couldn't do it. It so happened I was listening the week before and he went ahead. I was in the boarding house. He went ahead to say, your parents, they abandoned you here. I'm teaching you, and you're wasting my time. And I put my hand up and I was like, I can do it. And I was like, oh, you can? Come do it. So I did it. And he looked at me and he said, you'll be a fantastic architect. I don't know if he was right, but he
was. What you mean? Of course he was.
But I was, GS3 would have been what year now? 97. So I must have been around 11 years old. And that kind of stuck with me. I just decided I'm going to be a fantastic architect and that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to be. So it's interesting that you can speak things into people's lives, especially when they're very, very young. I think that's somewhat of a lesson for someone like me who plans to have kids at some point, to be very intentional about the things that you say to them so that you can help forge that path.
Yeah, one of my friends, she's older than me, and when I had my daughter, I was a lot younger. And so a lot of the parents that I was friends with might be 10, 15 years older than me. And this friend was an older mom anyway. And she had a mom that was an educator. And she said that about her grandmother said about her mother, that her mother would always be in the field putting flowers together in bouquets. That she just always was doing floral arrangements as a very little girl, like 2-3 years old, she was doing floral arrangements. And she said that, her grandmother knew that her mother would be a florist. She also became a school teacher, but her business, her main business, her passion was being a florist. And she owned a floral shop until she died. And then her daughter took it over. And so hearing that advice, and I think our daughters were in kindergarten at this time, just made me think like, oh, let me pay attention to the things that my child is interested in. Mm-hmm. And not just think that all kids are doing this or all kids do that, because she was very into putting things together, making art. She might take an empty bottle of water and stick a piece of paper on the top of it and cut it in. I mean, she was doing all kinds of things like that. And before my friend had said that, I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, oh, all kids love to do art. But she really loved to do art. And she's grown and she continues to do art.
Well, she's a fantastic nail artist.
Yes, she is.
And I've seen her work myself, even though I've not been able to patronize her business yet. I think her work is kind of Gen Z for me.
It's super Gen Z. You have to go in there and tell her you want something grown. Because anytime I say, oh, I want to get my nails done, she's like, are you going to get something fun, Mom? If you're not going to get anything fun. I'm like, oh, come on.
Cool. All right. So you're a professor, you're a writer, and you do podcasts as well. You've done some audio stuff. Mm-hmm. How do you find the time?
I have more time now than I used to because I don't do anything that I don't want to do. And
notes to self, Adi.
And it's very hard fought. I think it comes from, sort of being on that path so early and staying on it and going through all of the things and getting tenure. But even I always knew that I did not want to be sort of a traditional academic person in the sense that I'm just going to, go through and get my promotions and maybe I'll move into administration and things like that. I was like, all of that exhausts me. I know I don't want that. I just want to rest. I just want to rest and have fun. And after my father died, it really, and this was in 2016, it really reorganized my priorities for what I wanted to do in my life. I just didn't have the energy anymore to do things I didn't want to do. And then the pandemic reinforced that idea of just like, okay, what is absolutely essential for you, like for your life force? What is absolutely essential? That's what you have to do.
Yeah, I get it. But I almost feel like I get it. I completely get it. I agree. But sometimes it feels like it can be difficult. So as with you talking, there are several places I kind of want to go to. So let me save the best for the last, or what the conversation I really want to have for the last. So, but in having your kid very young, why didn't it stop you? The easier thing would have been to just stop, right?
Yeah, it was so funny when I had moved in with my boyfriend, my daughter's father, and I hadn't told my mom. So then I finally told her. I was like, oh, we live together. And she was like, oh, no, you're going to become pregnant. And then I didn't say anything because I was 5 months pregnant already because I hadn't told her. And she said, oh, my God, you're already pregnant. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, you must finish school. You have to finish school. And I was like, it never occurred to me not to finish school. Yeah. And the baby was due in June. I graduated in May. And yeah, I graduated in May. I had her the next month and I was already in summer school online because my undergraduate was in literature and I was going to do the master's in sociology. So I needed some prerequisites. So I was taking statistics and methods online and
with a newborn.
Yes. And there's this thing called the boppy pillow and it fits around your waist here and you can sit the baby on it. I mean, sometimes you're not supposed to do it, but you sit the baby on it and I would just sit her on it and she would be nursing and I would be doing statistics.
Okay. Wow.
That's why I only do what I want now. I really, I really did it all back then. That was one, I mean, just so my inner drive was just, going
you had to get it done.
Yeah, going to continue. Yeah. And I was fortunate, I was young. I had an easy pregnancy. I had an easy birth. Just super, nothing out of the ordinary.
I know you make it sound easy, but I don't think it's that easy. I don't even have any kids right now in my life. So I can't imagine trying to add a kid to anything.
Well, I think, when you get older, it definitely is more complicated because it's like, okay, where does this little person fit? Where, what in about my body? Mm-hmm. What about my body? How am I going to think about how I'm going to navigate this? When you're young, you literally have no sense. And so everything you just go with the flow. Everything's just slapped together. So even for a person like me that was very driven, I was just like, oh, this is just going to work out. And so her father, when he was in class, I had her. And when I was in class, he had her.
It was okay.
And that we just arranged our schedules in that way. But the other reason why I didn't just quit was because a year later, he killed himself. So this was like a few days before I started teaching that first class for the first time that he killed himself. And I was like, oh, now I really can't quit. There's no other blood parent. My mother and father and sister would help out, but I'm from the kind of family where it's just like, you had that baby, that's your baby. And so, yeah, I was very like, oh, I have to just keep going. So I did. And I taught that class, and then I was also applying to PhD programs. And for a minute, it made me feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't apply to things far away. Maybe I should apply to programs that are closer to home, so I can have some help. But then I was like, no, I have to go big or go home. Like, I have to go to the best school because I'm a single mom now. I don't have this other parent. I need to be able to do everything possible to make sure that we can have a good life. So then, because I had always planned to apply to Northwestern, and he and I had discussed going to Chicago because he was going to go to dental school there, and then I was going to go to Northwestern. I mean, this was all a dream. Like, I didn't know I was going to get into there, actually. I just really wanted to get into there. And yeah, I did. I got into there, and then I got into several other places. But Chicago wasn't far from Memphis per se. You could drive it. It was like 8 or 9 hours, and there was a train.
It's funny that you said 8 or 9 hours. You could drive it.
You could drive it. I mean, like, not all the time, but if you had to, you could drive it. I certainly did. Now, I would not drive anywhere now. Honestly, I just would not drive anywhere now. But yeah, you could drive it if, and I did. And there was a train.
Okay.
Amtrak. And a bus. I took the bus one time back and forth there, and a plane. And I used to fly there because I ended up coming back to Memphis because I got a fellowship after I finished my coursework. And I would fly back and forth there on my auntie's buddy passes for United.
Wow.
Every week.
Oh.
Every Thursday.
And did you always take your daughter with you when you went?
No. Now, when I went, so what would happen was my flight would be at 6 o'clock in the morning. I would leave for the airport like 5:30. This is, way back. This is way back in the day. I would leave. It was after 9/11, but still back in the day. I would leave for the airport like 5:30, get there, roll up right as the door was getting ready to close. And my mom would come, or my boyfriend at the time would be there, and they would be there with Asata, and they would get her to school, to daycare. And then when I would get back, somebody would get her from school, and I would be home that evening. Either I would take the 7:50 plane home and get back like 9:15, or I would take a train home, which is an 8 o'clock train, but I wouldn't get there until the next morning.
Okay, so right now you remind me of a guy. First of all, before I go to what you remind me of, I'm sorry about Asat's father's death. That must we might talk a little bit more about it as we go on. But you remind me of David Goggins. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's an athlete, a ex-Navy SEAL. He's one of those people that has he has a will and a drive that is, I can't even put words to it. He has a book out there called Can't Hurt Me. But he's one of those people that believes that if you can think it, you can do it, and our bodies can just go. I know some people have a whole school of thought that is unhealthy to approach things that way, but there's some value in it. If you do put your mind to what you want to do, you can get it done. I feel like a driven person myself, but when you hear someone else's story, I'm like, I don't know.
I mean, when I hear my own story, I have no idea who that person was that was doing that. Like, it just seems like a completely different person. And I'm sure I did become several different people after that. But it just seems that there was, my mind was completely in control. It was task, go, like that.
All right. How were you able to navigate that period, like losing a loved one to suicide and having a baby by them? Is this something you want to talk about?
Yeah, it was, I'm still figuring that out, because now I'm going to tell you some astrology. Because this is actually something that I'm thinking about, because this weekend there is an eclipse, a South Node eclipse in Libra. And South Node is where you let things go. What are you releasing? And Libra is the sign that's all about justice and balance and fairness. And for me, Libra is my first house, which is that means that's your personality. That's who you are. That's your house of self.
Is that your main star? Were you born in the September, October time?
No. So I was born in June. So your sun can be anywhere in your chart. But that first house is your rising sign, and it's the one that defines you. Like,
so you're in Libra rising.
In Libra rising. And the last time there was a South Node eclipse here was in October of 2004, after DeMondre died. And so I've been thinking a lot about, like, what was that time? And I'm in a very different place now. I'm writing a book that deals somewhat, talks a little bit about my experience. So I've really been trying to sit with that question, like, what was that like? How did I get through that? And I think, part of it was that when he died, he did not go away. He was very present. I remember being outside of the house where he had killed himself, and I was talking to a detective. And the detective is speaking, but there is a group of gnats that has shaped itself like a head and a shoulders and arms. And it's about 6'2", 6'3". That's his height. And the gnats are kind of like moving, gesticulating, as if a person was like waving their arms at me. And I looked at it and I was like, that's not happening. So I'm imagining things, because it was strange, because I was like, gnats shouldn't be around gathered like this time of day. They usually do that in the evening time. I was like, what is this? So I really kind of put it out of my mind and went on. But then, as the writer Toni Morrison would say, strange things started to happen. And I was experiencing like lights being turned on and off, and the radio being turned on and off, and the testing button on the smoke detector being beeped. And I one day was so just like, what am I supposed to do with this? I just ran out of my house. I didn't even know where or what a botanica was. I don't know if I looked it up on the internet. I don't know what I did, but I end up at this place that's a spiritual supply store. Okay. And I say to the man, hey, I think that my dead baby daddy, who killed himself is haunting me because he didn't cross over, because he thought death was going to end his pain and it didn't. And I need some help. And that man just looked at me and he was like, yeah, sure.
Okay.
And he was the first person that I had really, because I told my mom these things, and she's, a Southern Baptist lady. She was like, the dead know nothing, like
pray
just
away.
pray. Yeah, just, that's just basically like, that's not happening, or that can't happen. That's what she was saying to me. And I think, she was trying to figure out, how do you comfort your daughter who has just experienced this? Because we were on the phone together when he did it. So in addition to it happening, I heard it happen and then I was in the next county for a student event, and I had to come back to our house to like be at the scene. And so I think she was just trying to figure out how to comfort me. And I was just trying to figure out how to make the stuff in the house stop happening. And so, he told me to set up an altar. And he talked to me about altars and what I could do. And so I think I must have left there, like with a white candle and incense, different things like that. And then I just set it all up and I said, okay, do you want to talk?
Okay.
Let's talk. And so also during that time, I'm teaching my first class for the first time. I don't have my person who was co-parenting with me, who was keeping the baby when I was in class. So I had to start calling on my community. One friend would keep her when I had a gender seminar in the afternoon. My mom would come for another time I had class. My dad would come and keep her when I had to teach. But the rest of the time it was just us.
Yeah.
And I would just most of the time like play with her, do whatever I needed to do to get her situated for bed. Then I would do my work, and then I would go to the altar, especially if he was doing something to make his presence known. Then I would go to the altar.
Okay, so I have questions, tons of them. I hope I can even remember them. So the altar was in his honor.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was a space to communicate with him.
Did you ever feel like you did communicate?
Oh, yes. I mean, and he, as I sort of suspected, he was upset about his death. And he was upset that he was kind of in this liminal space. He didn't really know what to do. And I had to learn, how to help a person on the other side. Like, do they need food? Do they need money? Do they need water? Do they need constant communication?
Are those needs that are needed on the other side?
I mean, I feel like what I've learned is that there are ways that the other side is sort of on this side too. It's just a veil between us, and like they coexist with us.
Okay, we're actually crossing very illogical boundaries. So let's take a break for a second and talk about your hair. We'll come back. We'll come back to all of this. Let's just talk about your hair for a second. So how long have you had locks?
So this set of locks is I started accidentally. The pandemic made me start these locks.
Her locks are beautiful, by the way.
The pandemic made me start these locks. So it would have been March 2020 that I would have gone to the barbershop and
cut it all off.
And cut it all off because I had a very low haircut. And then I said, maybe I'll start my locks again. So December 2019, my loctician in Memphis, she did it when I was home for the holiday. And she was like, you ain't gonna keep these because you always take them down and cut your hair. And my hair was, very short. And because I look back at my license from that I got when I moved to DC in 2019, and it's just like very low blonde afro. And 2020, no barbershop. And so
you just let it grow.
I just let it grow. And I cannot remember when I found you, but it was like, oh my God intends for me to have these locks because
I think it was sometime in 2021.
Yes.
Shortly after I opened in Silver Spring, because I think you must have been one of my very first wave of clients that I got. Yeah.
Yeah, because we had been in Memphis for most of the pandemic. For like, we went home in May 2020, and we didn't come back till April or so of 2021. And I think maybe we went back for a little bit in the summer. But in any event, by the time fall 2021 started, it was like, okay, I have to have a loctician because I have had locks previously, but I never had a loctician.
Okay.
I had my first set of locks when I was pregnant with Asata.
And did you do it yourself?
I did. And all of us were just like, we were such rogue people. We just, all twisting our hair, and then just, so many of us during that time in Memphis were doing that. Well, I say so many of us, but there was still like a lot of taboo or discrimination against locks, especially for women. The standard stereotypes, they're dirty, all these kinds of things like this.
So why did you do it at that time, considering that you were, going along the line of academics, you're a serious person?
I mean, I felt like this was a serious thing. Like
it is a serious thing.
I felt like this hair was very serious, and I felt like it was an expression of me.
Okay.
And because I had cut my hair all off, I had a relaxer. And I had cut all that hair off my sophomore year, my second year, which was technically my junior year. So 19, I cut all my hair off. And that's when I started the locks, actually. After I was going to the barbershop for a little while, and then I started letting it grow, and then I just started twisting it, and then
just let it
all
be.
of a sudden, yes, I had these wonderful, beautiful locks. And yeah, I cut that set of locks off, which were, neckish length, a little bit to the shoulder maybe. Because I thought I was driving in the car and I thought I felt that DeMadre was pulling them when he was no longer there, which is something that he would do when I was driving. And I was like, oh no, these got to go. So I cut them off. And so that was the first set. And then after a while, and then I just went to the barbershop for a while. And after a while, I felt like, okay, I'm ready to grow my hair back. And I did.
Is this the second set?
This is my fourth set of locks.
Okay.
This is my fourth set of locks. Mm-hmm.
But did you ever keep the ones you cut off?
I have two sets of them that Mm-hmm.
Do you ever think of reattaching them?
So when I first kept them, I was only keeping them, so no one would get them and do juju to them. And then later on, people were there were more locticians like offering services and things like that. And I saw reattachment services. And I remember talking to one of my good friends about this. And she didn't say this directly. But what I intuitive from what she said was, girl, why are you going to attach that old energy to your head?
I think the exact same thing, because I did cut my hair last year and I had grown them down to my butt and I still have them. I'm not really sure why, because I'm not attached to them in any way, or so I think. But I don't think I will ever put them back. I feel like those years are those years.
Yeah.
And what I have now is now.
Yeah, this, like, I can definitely, with this set of locks, I can say that I definitely don't have any attachment to those sets. And I just haven't, it comes up every now and again, like if it's a solstice, winter solstice or something, I think, oh, it's time to sort of release this hair, burn it or something like that. But yeah, but when I was first thinking about it, when I first realized it, I was like, oh yes, I can just attach my old hair back. I can just put it back. But no, absolutely not.
And as a professor at Georgetown today, do you feel like the hair is an expectation since you actually already are in the African studies space? Or is it something that your colleagues still frown about? Do you feel like there's still a any sort of discrimination about locks today?
I do not. And I know that there are Black women who work in other kinds of professional spaces who feel that, they need to have straight hair or they need to have a straight wig or something like that. And there is very real discrimination against Black women's hair, period, everywhere. But I think I have always just been like, this is my hair.
Get with it
or don't. I don't, I will say that my experiences of discrimination often have very little to do with my hair and everything to do with my race and gender.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So many conversations. Okay, now that we have taken a break, let's go back. You said your mom was Baptist, and I will assume you grew up Baptist.
I did grow up in the church, but we grew up very skeptical because my mother, I feel like she would say, this is absurd for me to say this, but she wasn't like the most fervent believer. And what I mean by that is that she had questions and she asked questions and she didn't take things uncritically.
Okay.
And so she didn't think that children...
You're all academics, so...
Yeah. She was a journalism major in college. So she's all about the questions, even for the Bible. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. She's all about the questions. And she taught us to question. And so when we would be in Sunday school, like 9-10 years old, I would be really going toe to toe with the Sunday school teacher. He was a man and he would say misogynist things all the time. And I don't think I didn't even know the word misogynist, but I knew, like, you're talking badly about women. Why does this book say this? Why? I know that I was so deeply annoying to him. And my mother didn't really require that we believe.
Okay.
She just thought that Sunday school was just, good socialization. You learn a little bit about morality. It's
actually also a good network. Like
yes,
said, so.
But she wasn't even concerned about that. She was not, like, we didn't go to that kind of church. We went to a church that she had gone to for a long time. It was a kind of I would say, an old folks church, and it wasn't one of the elite churches.
Even networking, you're
just a country church. Country Black people
hearing the word,
hearing the singing, giving the offering, hearing the singing, which I loved. And yeah, that was it.
Okay, so when you had this experience and you felt like a scientist father was still around you, what prompted you to seek alternative, solutions to the issue that you were having?
Now, keep in mind, at this time, I am a super scientist. I am a total Western empiricist. Like, I am like, can I prove it? How can I study it? What is how do I collect the data and so forth? And so for a long time, I was gaslighting myself that these things were even happening. I was like, no, these can't be happening. Can't be happening. Because, like, so for instance, when the radio came on, the radio was not plugged in. I had unplugged it because it was coming on. And so when I had it plugged up and it was coming on, I could say, oh, well, the cord has a short.
Okay.
That's the explanation for that.
It makes sense.
But when I unplugged it and it was coming on, I was just like, something's not right. Something's not right. And then even then, I'm like, maybe some internal mechanism. Maybe there's a malfunction. Maybe there's still some electrical juice left in it from when it was plugged up before. I mean, look, I was looking for all the other explanations possible because I just didn't grow up to believe any of that. Nobody talked about ghosts. Nobody talked about spirits. Again, my mother was always talking about the dead know nothing, so in our conversations about the dead, when people would die, it was just like, they're dead. That's it. There's, they went to heaven or they went to hell or whatever. We don't know. They're just dead. So the idea of an afterlife was new to me. And the first thing I did before I went to alternative help was to go to the library.
Okay.
And yeah, I read books about Hoodoo religion and about African traditional religion. And I was like, oh, so there are other ways of thinking about death that could be at play here. And this could possibly be what's going on. So it was me being introduced to whole different worldviews of what might be happening. And over the years, I've come to learn these worldviews were always in our family. These worldviews were always in our family. It's just that my mom was such an empiricist, you know, it was breaking from the old country ways.
Right.
Her generation.
Right. Which is very much linked to the African ways. Okay. Today, do you identify with any religion or social groups, or do you just do your own thing?
I just do my own thing. And it's influenced by Hoodoo religion, and it's influenced by Old Baptist religion, and it's influenced by Kikongo traditions, and it's influenced by Yoruba traditions. So I have all these things, but I would say that the place that I am grounded the most is, you know, most African traditional religions and most Black folks in America, most Black folks in the world, we are about that ancestor worship. We're about, or ancestor veneration, having these conversations with our ancestors. And so that's the place where I squarely identify as a person who does ancestor veneration, and as a person who believes that, yeah, you have the power, you have the ashe, you can change things, you can make things so.
Okay. So this conversation, and I think we've had similar in the salon, is interesting because one will think that for somebody like me who grew up in Africa, you would be more in touch with the, at least Yoruba. You know, I know exactly where I'm from. I can take you to my great-grandfather's house. So one would think that I would be more in touch with the local religions that exist in Africa. But like many other Nigerians who would be listening to this, they could all tell you that you're either Christian or Muslim. And most times, if anybody else is doing any sort of traditional African worship, it's usually underground. So interestingly, my dad died in 2019. And many years before he died, he had been separated from my mom. I was already in university when that separation happened. So there was no requirement for us to spend time, share space. And I was angry with him for you know, unrightfully angry with him because of my mom, who my mom wasn't asking me to be angry, but I had all of that anger, and I wasn't speaking to my dad for a very long time. And when I even started to speak to him, I would do the New Year, Christmas, birthdays, and not really have a relationship with him. And I think this might be a good place to say that I did meet someone, an older friend, about 15 years older than me, who also had a daughter that he was separated or divorced from her mom. And I could see him, his daughter was about my age when my parents separated. And I could see him constantly try to reach out to his daughter in a way that she was very, you know, nonchalant of his presence. Regardless of all the things that my father did that may not have been good by moral standards, he always did try to be there for me. And over those years, he always tried to reach out for me. So just seeing the same occurrence happen outside of myself, so I could see myself in that young girl, and I could see my father in my friend. And I could see a man who was genuinely saying, I'm not perfect, but I'm still your father and I want to be there for you. And I had this father that I was practically ignoring, you know, the best relationship I had at that time. And this must have been 2017, so about 2 years before he died, was me kind of maybe feeling guilty sometimes, and I'll send him some money even though he didn't need it. But he'll be very happy that I did, because for him it just meant I was thinking of him. So that experiencing you know, my life playing out in someone else's life made me reconnect with my dad. And the very first time I called him to say, hey dad, I want to come and see you, he said, let me call you back. And he was a politician in Nigeria. He kind of had a big position in Lagos. And he said, let me call you back. And he called me back and he said, yeah, I've cleared my calendar, for the whole day. Just let me know when. And I was like, it's not that serious. I'm just coming to see you, But that, now that he's gone, that really does make me feel very special. So in reconnecting with him over those 2 years before he fell sick, had cancer and died, I got to realize that he had converted to Ogun worship, which is one of the African religious worships. And because my mom is a Christian, even though my parents, while they were together, there was no big emphasis on religion. He grew up Muslim, she was Christian. I have aunties who are Catholic, Pentecostal. So like wherever you are, you just do what they do.
You do what they do.
You
do what they do.
When you go to Auntie Liz's house, you read the rosary. When you go to Auntie Angela's house, you go for night vigil.
That's right.
Wherever you are,
That's
when it's time for, when grandma is doing salah, you go and eat the salah meat. So for me, it was just all the same. Religion was dependent on who you were with.
Yes.
So whichever family you were with. So he told me he had started worshiping Ogun, and he kind of told me his experience about it. He was skeptical because he felt a lot of people frown at African religions and he didn't know how Christian I was or how, off. So he didn't want to do anything or say anything that would push me away from him. But I found it kind of cool. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I want to know more. Why are you doing it? What does it mean? How is it different? How do you worship? What makes it so different? So we had all those conversations. And he requested, because he was sick for a while before he died, so he knew he was dying. And he requested he wanted an Ogun funeral. And that, I think I did show you pictures of the funeral.
Those are unforgettable photos.
It ended up being the most amazing ceremony I've ever attended. It was so colorful. It was so bright. Apart from the fact that I had to walk barefoot and defeather a white chicken from where the procession started.
And how long was that walk?
It was probably about 3 hours. But it gave me a bigger connection to home. So I'm from a city that is very metropolitan, and oftentimes people say nobody is really from Lagos. Lagos belongs to everybody. And even though I grew up, I know exactly where my heritage is from. For the most part, I've kind of felt like, everybody's here is everybody's city. But that ceremony and how Lagos Island is one of the most populous places you could go to in Lagos. We did not have any police or any traffic controllers to come help with the procession. But when we started that procession, the roads parted. And I was like, wow, this is home. Because regardless of the millions of people who are here, those people who are from here are doing something, and you don't even have to be told. You just kind of give way for the people who own the land. So that gave me all sorts of connections. And so I bring up all of this story just to kind of connect, because you've talked about the ancestor veneration. Did I get the word right? And what does that really mean? Because my exposure to Ogun worship for me was fulfilling what my father wanted. And in the process of his illness and his death, I learned one or two things. In my mind, I was like, a religion is a religion. Religion has been used to control us over time. So it's not something I necessarily want to jump in or associate with, because people will always take advantage of organized religion. But what exactly does it mean to connect with your ancestors? Are they really there? Can you, for a fact, feel them? Or is it just wishful thinking? Is this like some low-class mass delusion?
Yes. Well, first, let me say thank you. I can listen to the story about your father like a million times, because I think it's such a beautiful thing, because we do fall out with our parents. I had a period, not necessarily of I wasn't estranged from my father, but I was upset with how he had treated my mother and how my mother, had sort of reacted in some ways. She was entitled to all the ways that she reacted, but it made our lives miserable, the both of them. So he was making her miserable. She was making
everybody else miserable.
And so then we were able to one time my mother was like, your father says you only call him when you want money. And I was like, ooh, busted. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize I was being seen
We're
like
supposed to have another relationship besides
I was
money.
like, what is he there for? But yeah, so I was glad that I wish I had more time with him to learn more things. I would ask him so many more questions, but I did get to have like a very, very, very good adult relationship with him. So I'm sorry for the loss of your father, but I'm so glad you had that time at the end to really just make some connections. And I'm so glad that you honored his wishes.
Oh, and yeah, it was a little bit of a battle, but we did it. It happened.
And you are blessed and highly favored. As they say in the Christian church, you're blessed and highly favored as
Amen.
a result. But yeah, I used to not, I didn't want to believe it about somebody being there on the other side. I really just didn't. But they proved to me over and over and over again their presence.
And you say this is your father, and
this is my father.
Asheta's father.
This is Asata's father. This is my maternal grandfather, who I never met before, but who I came into knowledge of simply because, well, I knew of him already. And I remember one time being upset, having my mother's upsetness with her father's absence. And my husband told me, well, your relationship with your grandfather is not your mother's relationship with her father. So you should try to reach out to him. He was talking about on the altar. Again, this is a man that I have never met. And it turned out that this man was so active. His youngest daughter, who is my youngest aunt, moved to Memphis. Had never lived in Memphis before. Her father told her never moved to Memphis. Had moved to Memphis for a very, very unique job opportunity. And my mother found out, because she had done her ancestry, my mother found out that we were actually related. She always knew that was her father. People in the neighborhood said it. But it was the way that Black people do back in the day. It's like, you look just like them. That's your daddy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we were all of a sudden connected to this whole other side of the family. And my aunt told me a story about my maternal grandfather escaping from the plantation. He was a sharecropper. His family was sharecroppers. Escaping from the plantation as a teenager and joining the military, changing his name, lying about his age, and ended up going to World War II. And after that story, I just felt like a wind blew open at my altar. And I was having dreams where he was coming and speaking to me and just telling me stories. This is the most powerful ancestor experience that I've had, because my dad is more so like, so when he first died, because I had done all that work with DeMondre, I knew exactly, how to set the altar, what to do, how long to wait, all of these things. And he was immediately there. And he would speak to me through any tool that I used. Now, in some African traditional religions, like in Ifa, for instance, it's going to be the Dilangun. It's not going to be you're not going to use any tarot cards or anything. You're just going to use the traditional implements. But
was that cowries?
Yeah, different cowries, and different
the thing and some powder. I don't know what the powder is made of.
And you have the mats that you're doing the divination on, and you're going to consult Ifa. Like that is very that is the religion, and that is what you're trained to do when you're initiated. And one of the things that I had to think about as a Black American was like, we all come from Africa, but when we got to the New World, we became an amalgamation of different religions, because there were multiple kinds of religions along the west coast of Africa and Central Africa, so many different religions. And as a people, I just can't even imagine all these different groups of African folks getting together and saying, okay, these are the things that are going to be a part of this new religion that we have in this new world, and it is hoodoo.
Okay.
Right. And so...
And hoodoo is the same thing as voodoo?
Hoodoo, not the same thing as voodoo.
Okay.
Right? Hoodoo, not the same thing as voodoo, right? Vodun, a Haitian practice, also still descended from African traditional religions, but also its own thing.
Okay.
So I had to learn that, yeah, we had our own things as new Black Americans, becoming Black Americans. And a lot of us ended up working with indigenous people who were already here to learn the herbs and stuff like that, because we were displaced from our typical plants. Some things we brought over and added here. And then we also learned from some old European traditions that were still what we might call the occult parts of things. And so we became an amalgam of these different forms of working with the earth, of understanding the portal between the living and the dead. Like my great-grandmother, my maternal great-grandmother was a midwife. So just like working with people who come in and then people who go out, all of those kinds of things just were so much a part of who we are. And you can still see the traces of it. Like Black people love a funeral. We are serious about, dealing with the dead. Yeah. And it's just that because of Christianity, oftentimes people feel scared to talk to the dead. But I meet people all the time. If they hear my story, if I'm giving a talk, just the other day, I was in public at a bar, at a rooftop bar. And a lady was sitting there and she was by herself. And there was kind of like a shared sitting space. And I'm telling you, 10 minutes later, we were talking about ancestors. Her grandmother her grandmother and grandfather had passed, and she was talking about how they come to her and how her grandmother had prepared her for her death and like what to do. And she has all these lucid dreams. And so I feel like there's a lot of shame, even though there's much more acceptance today, much more public practice and acceptance today. There's still some kind of shame or reticence about talking about having a relationship with the dead.
Yeah, it still feels somehow. Even for me talking to you today. And we've had these conversations before. We've talked about me putting together an altar.
Which you must do.
I'm like, that sounds like a good idea, but I don't even know where to start. I know you had given me some suggestions, and we'll see. I just wanted to add, and I think we kind of have to wrap up here in a bit. I think this conversation needs to continue to happen, but from an purely African perspective, sometimes we forget the impact of colonialism on mental slavery, because there's a whole, at least speaking for my country itself, at least 200 million of us who, the bigger percentage of us, are disconnected from an alternative. And I think having these conversations doesn't mean everybody should become an Ifa, Ogun, Amadioha worshiper, but I think it would be nice to have as much awareness of the alternatives as we do of the popular religions that you have out there. Yeah,
and to figure out like what works for you. Like I still grew up in church, so if the spirituals come on, like sometimes my ancestors, that's what they want to hear. They want me to sing that's a song, a gospel song to them. They want to hear those things. It doesn't mean that you sort of throw away all the things, but you do have to throw off the dogma, and you do have to throw off the colonialism. I think it's also related to the hair.
Okay.
A Jamaican man is going to tell me, I love your natty dread. I love your hair, whereas in other situations, the hair is just, some people might look down on it because it's tied to a certain kind of essence of who we are, and people are uncomfortable with that.
Okay. All right. Our producer is kind of kicking us out of the studio.
It's all good.
But hopefully we
plenty
can
to work with there.
Yeah, we can have some more time to continue to have this conversation, and it'll be interesting to see what the reaction is to this particular episode. But thank you so much, Zandria, for honoring my call and coming on the Locitude podcast. It's been
always
a pleasure hosting you.
Always a pleasure to talk to you.
I'll be looking forward to your next hair appointment in Virginia. And
I already got the map.
All right.
I'm going to get there.
If you're not driving, you can take the metro.
No, I'm taking the metro.
Yeah, it's a walking distance from Ashburn Station. So yeah, that's where it is.
All right.
So, all right, thank you very much. And it's a wrap for today. Hope to see you all next time. And keep it locked with an attitude. Maybe talk to an ancestor.
Yes, please.
All right. Bye.